control build of it, no Mantis Riders in the list. He has an extra copy of Dragon Master Outcast, more removal spells, even going so far as to put something like Planar Outburst in his main deck. That's going to serve him really well against Rob Vaughan, who's playing that Esper tokens just touching blue.
Although something very good for Vaughan in this matchup, 4 main deck copies of Silk Wrap, kills every creature in Todd's list. All of his creatures are 2 or 1 mana. Very good to exile them too, as Todd is playing with Ojutai's Command. And a big part of his deck's power level is recurring these threats with activated powers later on in the game.
Yeah, well, speaking of cheap creatures, both players are going to start on some. Rob Vaughan starts with Seeker of the Way, and this time it's Todd with the Silk Wrap as we trade some 2-mana spells to start off the game. Rob just develops with 3 mana. Maybe it's Todd's turn for a threat? It is. It'll be Jace Vryn's Prodigy on his side. We go back over to Robert. So the Esper Tokens deck, in a lot of ways, it's a black-white. It's still this black-white mid-range deck, but we've talked before, and we saw this yesterday when Rob Vaughan actually managed, I believe, to defeat, he played, I believe, Rudy Briska earlier on.
Yes.
With that combination of Secure the Waste and Gideon, ally of Zendikar, has this, synergy-based finish to the deck.
And can also just afford to be playing double black and double white spells, something that's much harder to do with some of the other mana bases in the format. So he gets access to Knight of the White Orchid, Gideon, and Ruinous Path and Ob Nixilis on the other side.
What's going to be some Planeswalkers squaring off against each other? Todd plays the Jace, but no sooner does Robert answer with Gideon, ally of Zendikar. It'll make a 2-2 Knight as we go back to Todd's 4th turn. Can he match? See, a loot from Jace gets rid of Dragon Master Outcast.
And Gideon is a bit of a vulnerability for Todd's list. He doesn't have a lot in the way of haste or threats that attack in general. Also, he doesn't have Jeskai Charm, which was one of the cleaner answers to Gideon. He's really leaning on Utter End or just overpowering it.
Yeah, we saw Jay Dean yesterday on the same black really do a great job against Brad Nelson's Gideon just by cleanly answering it with Jeskai Charm. And this, you were mentioning it, this is one of the weaknesses when you don't play Mantis Riders, I would think, is that Gideon is a lot harder to deal with.
Well, Todd has made some concessions to Gideon. He has 2 main deck copies of Negate, which is a very good answer. He can string together Kolagon's commands. That can potentially answer Gideon. So he's got some sideways ways to handle it on top of a couple copies of Utter End, but it's not the easiest card for him to get off the table once it resolves. And Robert was able to get it into play on the play and appears to be accruing quite the advantage right now.
Yeah, we go back to Robert's 5th turn. He just continues to make knights and attack them as he'll pass to Todd. What Todd did do is he held up 4 mana here for a possible Ojutai's Command. However, Robert's not going to let him do that one. Here's Silk Wrap, not a creature spell. It's going to go after the Jace. And Todd will let that one go and then cast Ojutai's Command. Now, this is interesting. Todd, I believe, may have a negate in hand.
Yeah, it looks like he was committing his turn here to casting Ojutai's Command. We'll find out the modes momentarily.
Yeah, opting for this Ojutai's Command over something like negating the Silk Wrap. Ojutai's Command, I mean, perhaps he's going for Dragon Master Outcast, and I think that is what it's going to be. He's going to draw a card and put that into play. In response to that, Todd's going to go ahead and secure the wastes for 2, so that gives him 2 soldiers to accompany his 2 knight allies. We go back to Todd's 5th turn. So maybe Todd's answer, rather than trying to kill the Gideon, is going to be to make dragons and simply overpower.
Well, that's going to be a challenging line to develop here, because Vaughan is going to be able to make a token every turn with Gideon, and is threatening pretty quickly to be able to make an emblem and just overrun Todd before Dragon Master Outcast is able to do much of anything.
That's a really good point. With 4 creatures in play, that emblem is not messing around. Life totals, Robert Vaughn's at 19, Todd is at 17, so both players still healthy for the time being, though Robert threatening at least 6 damage next turn.
Also, bear in mind that Vaughan has a Shambling Vent in play, which is an additional threat down the line.
All right, Todd surveys the board. 5 lands in play. He has Negate, Dig Through Time, Ojutai's Command, Crackling Doom, and Fiery Impulse. Plenty of removal, but none of it ready to take care of something like Gideon. We go back over to Robert here for turn 6. Sitting on Robert's side, does have the answer to Dragon Master Outcast in Murderous Cut. Has at least 1 more land to go with it. But you mentioned Shambling Vent in play. Represents possibly 5 creatures. I'll go ahead and fetch. With 2 cards in the graveyard, Todd's not quite at Dig Through Time. He does have access to all colors of mana. Could do something like Crackling Doom and Fiery Impulse on the same turn if you wished.
The problem, I believe, is that Vaughan has several removal spells in hand, so if Anderson ever puts the shields down, with mana-wise interacting with Vaughn's board, it's possible that Vaughan will be able to answer the Dragon Master Outcast, and Vaughan will still be left with Gideon in play.
Yeah, you're right. He has Utter End and Murderous Cut, so he does have the removal spell, even despite Todd's negate in hand right now. We see here, Shambling Vent activated. Gideon did not emblem this turn. He just made another Knight ally.
And I like this play a lot from Vaughan. He doesn't even need to answer Dragon Master Outcast just yet. With 2 mana available and 3 cards in the graveyard, he can cast the Murderous Cut in his hand. So if Anderson doesn't do anything with his mana, Vaughan will probably just pass the turn back to him. And if Anderson taps out for something, then that's an opportunity for Vaughan to take care of the Dragon Master Outcast.
Yeah, this is 8 power worth of creatures. That's too much for Todd to deal with, so he's going to start with Crackling Doom. Of note, actually, because of his mana, I mentioned before that he had 4 mana. So I talked about Fire Impulse plus Crackling Doom, but one of Todd's lands is an island, so he actually can't make that play. Crackling Doom is going to deal 2 damage to Gideon. It'll take care of one of the, should be one of the Knight allies here. Okay, it took care of the Knight that was made that turn. Dragon Master Outcast traded with one of the soldiers. So 2 Knights still get in, 1 soldier gets in, Shambling Vent still gets in. That's still 7 to Todd. He goes down to 10. And we go back to Todd. Main phase, his draw for the turn will take care of Gideon, though. He casts Kolagon's Command, 2 damage to Gideon, brings back Dragon Master Outcast, plays it. Good setup for Todd. He still has 1 red left over for Fiery Impulse.
And very critical here that he was able to get Gideon off of the table. Like I said, he had some sideways answers to it besides the Utter End, so you saw him cobble together there with Crackling Doom and Kolagon's Command.
However, Dragon Master Outcast will be the price paid. Silkwrap was a draw for Robert, and it will go ahead and exile away the Dragon Master Outcast. He fires up Shambling Vent and attacks, but now with Spell Mastery, Todd can Fiery Impulse takes care of the Vent. He only takes 5 on the attack, but that puts him down to 5, facing lethal next turn from 2 allies and a soldier.
I really like the way that Vaughn's been using his resources this turn, or this game rather. He's been sticking things when Todd has had the shields down, and when Todd has left up a lot of mana, has been very conservative with what he's trying to accomplish.
Yeah, great plays on both sides, actually. Todd, I liked with the Crackling Doom, he did 2 to the Gideon to set himself up so that when he did draw Kolagon's Command, he got a great value off of it. He's down to 5, and that's a tough spot, but you do see here Todd gets to play Dig Through Time, trying to find some cheap answers to take care of some more of these creatures. You see Fiery Impulse among the cards that he can select here. Soulfire Grandmaster as well. He's low, but with lifelink and some cheap removal, you could see a spot where Todd cobbles together a comeback.
Yes, the issue here, of course, is that Vaughan is going wide. He's generating a lot of small threats. So Anderson's 1-for-1 spot removal doesn't answer this board that efficiently.
Yeah, and I think to that effect, you see Todd here taking Soulfire Grandmaster and casting it for that purpose of saying, hey, I can't really kill you with removal spells, but if my removal spells gain life, maybe I don't need to. However, Murderous Cut on Vaughn's side takes care of Soulfire. There's an attack for 5, and game 1 is to Vaughan.
Very nice use of resources there from Vaughan over the course of the game. Like I said, was very aggressive in landing some cards there. Played Secure the Waste for 2 when Anderson was tapped out rather than trying to go for the kill and secure for a bunch because he knows that Anderson has counterspells in his list. And then when Anderson had mana available, Vaughan, very conservative, just made the attacks and wait for Anderson to make a move.
Yeah, so players will get ready for game 2 here. If you're joining us right now, we're just starting day 2 coverage here of the Philadelphia Open. We had 9 full rounds of Standard yesterday. There were some excellent matches, including a real showing from Todd Anderson and the power of Dragon Master Outcast. If you missed that and wanted to catch all the action yesterday, do remember to check us out at youtube.com/StarCityGames. We have our Open Series archives of all our events, so you can make sure to catch up on all the action and tech that the pro players are playing. In addition to that, we have our Versus Series videos to see some of the matchups broken down by lots of the Star City Games people you know and love to watch. We have archives for some of our premium unboxings and a lot more content. You want to follow all of that at youtube.com/StarCityGames.
If you become a subscriber to that page, you will be notified when new content is uploaded. New content getting uploaded all the time, and it's free to sign up, so head over to youtube.com/StarCityGames.
All right, well, Todd, great display yesterday, but for today, he starts out in a hole against Robert Vaughan. He's down a game and going to have to come back. Let's go over to the sideboard and see what sort of weapons he has. has?
3 copies of Infinite Obliteration, 2 Russian Cleric, 2 Radiant Flames, a Master of the Unseen, and Erase, a Felidar Cub, a Dispel, a Disdainful Stroke, 2 copies of Painful Truths, and a Virulent Plague. I think the Virulent Plague is the most obvious,
Wow, yeah.
most obvious card here to bring in. Only 1 copy, but if it shows up, it's going to be great for Anderson. I think the 2 copy of Painful Truths will likely come in this matchup. Anderson says that he likes it, even in the mid-range tilting towards aggressive type of matchups. He really only doesn't bring it in against a Tarka Red. The rest of the counter spells here don't seem that great to me, but Radiant Flames also seems like an excellent answer to what Vaughn's doing.
Yeah, and this is some of the things a lot of these deck matchups feel like mid-range mirrors. You know, we see these like 2, 3, 4 color good stuff decks squaring off against each other. But what I like here in Todd's sideboard is just actual sweepers. We don't see too much of that in the mid-range deck. But yeah, 2 Radiant Flames, 1 Virulent Plague. That is a lot of great hard answers to the things that Robert's going to present.
And a lot of the reason that Anderson is playing with this volume of sweepers is because his threat base doesn't interfere with it. It's not like he's playing with Mantis Riders or other creatures that are kind of awkward when you're pairing them with cards like Radiant Flames. His threats are all cheap utility creatures that he can get back with Ojutai's command, so he can lean very much on sweepers in the appropriate matchups.
Yeah, I mean, Jace turns into a Planeswalker, so he doesn't really have to worry about sweeping that away. Dragon Master Outcast, that's a bit of a vulnerability, but you don't really play him early anyway. And the last creature has that he might hit with his own Radiant Flames is Soulfire Grandmaster. And actually, as we saw yesterday, sometimes you're just willing to make that play.
Right, Radiant Flames plus Soulfire Grandmaster is 3 life for each creature in play, and yeah, you're down a couple cards, but that cushion of life can be very valuable.
All right, so on Robert Vaughn's side, he has his sideboard as well. Now, I can't imagine he'll have something as powerful as 3 sweepers on Todd's side, but what can he do?
He gets counterspells and duresses, which is a pretty solid package here. He's got 2 copies of duress, 2 copies of negate, and a dispel. I expect all that stuff to come in. On top of that, he's got some cards that allow him to play a longer game if he thinks that Anderson is really suiting up for a control type of a game here. He can bring in Master of the Unseen. He can bring in Knight of the White Orchid for a little bit more mana. But the counterspells and the duresses are definitely going to come in, and these are the type of weapons you want against Jeskai Black. Cards that efficiently attack spells, especially Dig Through Time and Ojutai's Command.
So something like Archangel of Tithes, I see that in his sideboard. 5 toughness looks really good against Jeskai Black, but because of Ojutai's Command, can he go toward a 4-drop?
I think that it's not going to be a great card for him. He's playing against Ojutai's Command. He's playing against Utter End, and it's not a disruptive card to Anderson's strategy anyway. The only spot where Archangel Tithes is going to be good is if Anderson's leaning on a lot of red removal spells and 5 toughness proves to be prohibitive. But you look at the removal base here, it's Crackling Doom, it's Utter End, it's clean answers. So I would not bring in Archangel Tithes in this matchup.
All right, well, looks like Vaughan going to go ahead and keep his hand. Todd going down at least 1 card. Remember now the Vancouver mulligan in full effect. If you haven't been watching Magic over the last month, any player that takes a mulligan gets to start the game on a scry, which looks like it may be both players this time.
Yeah, Vaughan going back to 6. I have found in my dabbling with Modern that the Vancouver scry rule much more powerful for the player on the draw than the player on the play in formats with fetch lands, because scrying to the top on the play when you have a fetch land can be a little awkward, especially in this format where you occasionally want to be fetching battle lands that come into play tapped. Getting that out of the way as soon as possible is nice. So it's a small thing. But
yeah, there are some nuances to it. Even, and I definitely agree with that. I found that even in Limited, for example, there's cards like Fertile Thicket, which really interfere with your scry. At the same time, it's been very helpful. I'll say, at least speaking about Modern, with Amulet Bloom, I have loved the Vancouver mulligan.
For combo decks that aren't about achieving critical mass, that has to be where that rule is the most powerful.
Yeah, the difference between having a 7th card in your hand and, well, just getting to look at it and see if you want it. I mean, I'd rather draw it, but both are pretty acceptable.
It's close enough, right?
Yeah,
for a deck like Amulet Bloom.
Feels like I get two cracks at a 7-card hand.
I can even see it in some matchups where you're playing against discard, where it could actually be better for you for not to have, not have the card in your hand and have it resting on top of the deck instead.
That one could happen. So, I mean, it doesn't always work. Sometimes, you scry one and you see a white ley line on top and you say, well, that's not exactly like having it in my hand now. Vaughan contemplating a 5-card hand here. And we'll be a go. Todd on 6, Robert on 5 to start the game. Robert with 1 land in play, it's Caves of Coils. He has a pair of negates. I don't know if he has a 2nd land. Todd threatening right away with a turn 2 Jace. Can Robert play? He did have a Silk Wrap for the Jace, but no 2nd land, so he'll just go for Duress. And Todd's hand was all lands and a Disdainful Stroke, so Jace has to go to work.
Really important for Vaughan to draw land number 2. Anderson will clean up his hand, get a Jace flipped, then Silk Wrap's on answer, and run away with this game. If Vaughan can top deck and untap land next turn, he's in very good shape as Anderson's hands just isn't very good.
Yeah, his draw was dig through time. His loot was a second to dig through time. A little too much there. You see, he discarding a basic. He's going to play a fetch hand. Wants to get that graveyard built up fast as possible. Can Robert hit the land? No, it's Wingmate Rock. So Todd is going to get to flip the Jace next turn.
Fill up his graveyard, and now his hand is 2 copies of Dig Through Time.
Sounds great.
I think that Vaughan would have been hard-pressed even with land number 2 there unless it was blue mana, because Anderson was going to be in a position to fire off. These Dig Through Time is very important for Vaughan to be able to negate them, but without drawing land number 2 here, the Jace by itself will likely run away with this game.
And I think that's what you have to ask for in Robert's hand. I mean, you understand his keep on 5. He had 1 land, he had 2 negates, and a Silk Wrap. You'd think, hey, if that Silk Wrap comes down on the Jace, negates for Dig Through Time, yeah, 5-card hand's great. It was a high reward, the risk was there, Robert's not going to hit, and I don't know if we're going to have much of a game.
That opening hand has to be better than the average 4-card hand. If
Yeah.
Vaughan draws land number 2 there, he at least gets to play for a little while. He defends himself against a lot of Anderson's most powerful openings. Just did not pan out.
Jace here, going to loot. There's a Crackling Doom. Todd will discard it, flip it, get a Planeswalker. And it may just go plussing. Once Jace is flipped, Esper can't answer it right away. Todd shows Dig Through Time, and we'll go back to the drawing board for game 3.
Yeah, Vaughn's not going to wait around there.
Now, once Jace flips, outside of those other ends, Esper actually, this deck has a difficult time dealing with a flipped Planeswalker.
Well, you can attack and you can go wide. Vaughn's going to be able to secure the waste, resolve Gideon, and you can pressure Jace that way. But in terms of just removing it from the table, not the easiest thing to do. He is playing with 2 copies of Ruinous Path. Can be helpful there as well. But, you have your 4 copies of Silk Wrap. You have the ability to just attack. And you have a couple other spot removal spells, and you're hoping that mixture of cards is enough to keep Jace from going active and flipping reliably. In the first game, that mixture of cards was good enough, but you need to have a second land for any of this stuff to work, and Vaughan didn't have it there in game number 2.
Right, so back to the drawing board for him. We have seen, though, definitely going to those counter spells, as you mentioned, 2 copies of Negate, both in Robert's hand, as well as the Duress, so he's really attacking those non-creature cards in Todd's deck.
And a lot of these sideboard plans, I've noticed as I've covered more of the standard format, the Duress, Dispel, Negate sort of setups, they really do favor the player on the play. A lot of these games come down to critical moments with, can you force through whatever it is you're trying to force through, or can you keep your opponent off of doing that? And the person on the play operating with more mana and more opportunities to develop their board out in front of whatever they're trying to resolve has a pretty big edge when it's time to show down.
Yeah, and those spells are just so good against Jeskai and just a lot of the format. We see that. Esper tokens, Bant, Megamorph, these are 2-color decks that just go towards some negates in the sideboard, and Jeskai Black's one of the main reasons they do it.
Vaughan is way more likely, for example, to be able to force through a Gideon in the post-board games when he's on the play than when he's on the draw.
Right on the play, you'd have to have his one of Dispel, otherwise he's waiting 2 turns to do it, and that's expensive.
Yes, it's a pretty big cost. Vaughan also gets to set up this with the help of Duress for information and for pulling apart the Negate or the Disdainful Stroke or whatever card he's worried about in Anderson's hand.
Yeah, I mean, if you haven't had a chance to watch the coverage yesterday, Duress to me seemed like one of the most impactful cards we saw, whether it's out of something like Esper Tokens, where it seems really strong, or especially these decks which, like Obs on Aggro that have access to Den Protectors. Duresses have just seemed very good on the day.
Well, we look at Rob's list here. It's 10 creatures and 24 spells. We have Anderson's list in front of me. I don't have exact counts, but there's 9 creatures and quite a bit more than 9 spells.
Yeah, it's
so pretty good formats for Negate, Dispel, and Duress, and you see a variety of copies in all of these decks right now.
Yeah, and even in these decks, there's a lot of, there are creatures, they just don't have creature type lines. So we're underway for game number 3. Robert Vaughan and Todd Anderson at 7-2. Vaughan back on the play. He'll start with Seeker of the Way, much like he did in game 2. For Todd, he may answer with a 2-drop of his own, and he has some options. Soulfire Grandmaster and Mastery of the Unseen, both in his opener.
A little surprised to see Master the Unseen in Anderson's deck post-board. Was worried that it might be a little too slow to bring to bear in this matchup where Vaughan's the aggressor.
Yeah, I expected to see Robert go to something like that out of the sideboard. On Todd's side, it seems closer, right?
Yes.
Yeah, he'll go for Soulfire Grandmaster first. Back over to Vaughan. Multiple Gideons in hand. multiple Painful Truths, and a Ruinous Path. I'm not certain he has land 3.
Yeah, and it appears that that's not the case, and Vaughan really needed it there. With land number 3, he gets to cast Painful Truths, then attack for 3.
And nothing doing now. Todd will Crackling Doom at Robert. That's 2 damage from the spell, 2 more damage from the attack. Lifelink for all that Todd gains 4. We go back to Robert. He does hit land 3 this time. Has many Painful Truths at the ready. Could draw 2 here and make sure he hits his Gideon. Also, though, Ruinous Path in hand. Robert not willing to mess with it. He'll take the 2 life and 2 cards.
Yeah, I think he needs to just keep making land drops here. His hand is so chunky that he just needs to get to land 4 and 5 and 6 to be able to get much of anything going. So he is taking some shots here, but Anderson's deck is not the most aggressive. So I think that Vaughan can afford to take these shots.
Well, it'll cost him. So 2 damage off the Painful Truths, 2 damage off the Soulfire Grandmaster. Vaughan down to 12. Todd goes ahead and plays Mastery of the Unseen post-combat and passes back to Robert. But now Robert does have his 4th land. He hit that off the Painful Truths last turn. Has a choice of Planeswalkers, Gideon and Sorin, both at the ready.
And Anderson does have 2 mana up, which is the right cost for Disdainful Stroke and Negate. So Vaughn's got to be concerned about both of these things, but it looks like he's going to set up here for 1 turn and go for a Planeswalker next turn.
Wow, and so look, what a he duresses thinking, hey, he has to get by Negate, and Todd's hand is entirely lands right now. Had Robert just played a Gideon straight out into it, he would have been able to have one. As a result, I think he's taking the consolation prize of a Ruinous Path plus a Duress.
Yeah, this is not bad news. I mean, Vaughan was willing to give up this turn to ensure that his string of Planeswalkers could resolve, and he has the option to Painful Truths or Ruinous Path as appropriate given what's going on with Anderson's hand. I'm sure he would have liked to snag a spell, but this is not a bad consolation prize. Though if he's going for Prairie Stream here, this takes Ruinous Path off the table.
Yeah, now walk me through actually him making that play. Looks like he'll Murderous Cut the Soulfire. I understand wanting to protect the Gideon. However, when he has so many 4-mana Planeswalkers, he could have just started trying to run them all through the counter spells.
I think taking a turn off there is fine. There's not going to be a better window for Duress. And because Vaughan was able to Duress and make a play in the same turn, I think that's probably better than just running a counterspell out.
On Todd's turn, we know he has plenty of lands. We saw his hand was 4 of them last turn. He'll play 1 this turn, fetch and pass, so it's leaving up a Mastery of the Unseen activation. So despite being ahead on that mana, it's now Gideon versus Mastery of the Unseen. Both will make 2/2s.
And keep in mind, Anderson's list does not have a lot of juicy things to unmorph through Master of the Unseen. What you see is what you get for the most part. Most of the creatures are not appreciably better, and there's very few in the list. So outside of Dragon Master Outcast, Vaughan doesn't have to be too worried about what's happening off this Master of the Unseen. Gideon covers it for the most part.
Yeah, it doesn't have a lot of ways to pick up the cards or flip them. So pair a 2/2 on each side of the board. We go back to Todd. He finally did draw a spell. It was a copy of Dig Through Time. And you see Todd ready to go for that. He's going to play a fetch land, crack it. And with 6 cards in the graveyard, he can Dig Through Time this turn and activate Mastery if he wants to.
You're going to see Vaughan, remember, 1 copy of Dispel on the sideboard. This would be a really good time to have it.
And here's the test. Todd attempts to delve the whole graveyard for Dig. Does it resolve? It does. No Dispel from Vaughan, so Todd gets to refuel. Looking at 7, we see Painful Truths, another Dig Through Time, a Dispel of Todd's own, a Negate, and some lands. Can't imagine he's taking any of the lands. He has plenty of those already. Counterspells, card draw, those are his options.
I'm interested to see if Anderson feels like he has enough of a cushion here in terms of life to take Painful Truths. He is set up next turn to make land drop number 7, draw 3, and still have access to Mastery, or a variety of 4-mana plays that his deck can offer up.
That's a pretty sweet turn. Now, of concern, I would think, for Todd here is that if he is making Mastery tokens every turn, I feel like he'll eventually lose the fight to Gideon.
Yep, and that's why he's going to take another card drawer here as well. He has to decide if it's going to be Dig Through Time or Painful Truths. But he does need to eventually answer Gideon, and then Mastery can take over the game.
The take from Todd was Negate and Painful Truths. So just as you mentioned, a card drawer. And here comes the Manifest. It will attack at Gideon and then trade with the ally. So the board clear again.
And I like this attack from Anderson. He has Dig Through Time in his deck, so he's trying to trade off, get stuff in his graveyard to make the dig more efficient.
Yep, Manifest was another Painful Truths for Todd. So you go back over to Robert. No creatures on the board just yet. Of course, he'll get another one off his Gideon if he wants it.
And it looks like Vaughan has just top deck Dispel, which sets him up for a very nice turn here if he wants it with Sorin plus Dispel backup.
Yeah, Axel, I mean, you were talking last turn about just how good that would have been. On Robert's side, he's going to go more tokens. Gideon brings another ally to the board. Here's Sorin. A Dispel from Todd, or a Negate from Todd, but a Dispel from Robert forces the issue. So now it's 2 Planeswalkers to 0 in favor of Todd. He pluses the Sorin, gives his creature 1/0 lifelink, and passes back. Because Todd didn't negated that turn, he was not able to make a 2/2. Ahead on mana, but behind on the board. We go back to Todd Anderson.
And I like Vaughan plussing there. You might ask, well, what's the point of that? He wants to make sure that both Planeswalkers are out of Kolagon's command range and Crackling Doom range. So he wants Sorin's loyalty to be at 5. Next turn, unless it's really juicy to plus for whatever reason, we'll probably minus to make a vampire. That leaves Sorin at 3 and still out of the range of Anderson's variety of 2 damage effects.
So Todd leaves off on Painful Truths here. He gets to leave up 4 mana, draws 3 cards. He gets another land and 2 copies of Dig Through Time. So Todd getting ahead on resources. 7 lands in play, a mastery, lots of draw spells, but he's really behind on the board now.
Yes, and he's going to start probably taking some shots in the near future too, as Vaughan has these 2 unchecked Planeswalkers, and Vaughan can start going pretty aggressive here soon. A consolation prize here for Anderson is that he doesn't have to worry that much about Sorin's ultimate. That is something he can kind of work around.
Yeah, it's since he's not something like Obs on aggro, say, that ultimate, he has to sacrifice a creature every turn. He actually could get around that.
Yep.
Another ally from Gideon. Here's an attack. Note that Sorin was not plussed before the attack from Robert. Kind of suggests he might be going for a vampire.
I imagine so. I think that he wants, again, to keep the Planeswalkers above 2 loyalty if possible to prevent Crackling Doom and Kolagon's command from fishing off. But right now, just getting more threats on the table is more valuable to Vaughan than gaining some life or threatening going ultimate with Sorin.
So now with 2 Planeswalkers on the table, that's twice the Planeswalkers, twice the tokens for Robert. 2 allies in play, now a vampire in play, now Painful Truths to draw 3. Robert just doing everything. Todd, he knows that negates exist in the deck. He'll wait. In response to the Painful Truths, he's going to cast his own Dig Through Time. And now we see some threats for Todd. Felidar Cub, Dragon Master Outcast, another Jace, and a Radiant Flames picked up. That one looks really good right now.
Radiant Flames alongside Dragon Master Outcast feels like a very good pairing of cards here. Vaughan has to have a removal spell for the Dragon Master Outcast, and even if he does, the game's probably dragging out for a while, and then Ojutai's command becomes a player.
Yeah, those are the 2 cards taken by Todd, so he's got a game plan set up. But now we'll see Robert's game plan. Lose 3, draw 3. That's pretty good for him. Now flush on lands for Robert Vaughan. Looks like his draw 3 may have been a full trio of lands. So he'll pass, makes another blue mana, so he has some counter spells up. Not sure if he has one in hand, but certainly Todd will have to play around him. But he went down to 8 for that. We go back to Todd Anderson. He starts on Radiant Flames for 3. So 1 vampire, 2 allies, all hit the bin. Board's clear, but it's still those 2 Planeswalkers. You know the tokens will be coming back soon. And Todd follows up with the Dragon Master Outcast. Both his Dig Through Time cards cast. 4 mana up for an Utter End and a Dig if he wants them. And Todd, not even going to let Robert, he's going to let Robert untap and then upkeep. He'll Utter End away the Gideon. Now we know Robert has a 2nd copy of Gideon if he wants that.
Well, he also needs to just kill the Dragon Master Outcast, no question about it this turn.
Yeah, fortunately for him, Todd tapped out for the Utter End, so he knows that his removal spell is good here. Plays Shambling Vent for the turn. Here's 4 mana, Utter End for the Dragon Master Outcast. It's exiled. Sorin pluses back up to 4, and we're back to Todd. No tokens on the board for Robert. He had to take the full turn off killing creatures. And has Todd turned the corner? It's starting to feel like maybe.
Oh, I think that Anderson has definitely turned the corner here because now Master of the Unseen's in play. They've done a lot of trading here. Vaughn's resources are tied in a lot with Planeswalkers, which Anderson can kind of answer, slowly but surely. Vaughan can't get this Master of the Unseen off the table as easily. His Utter Ends are taxed on Dragon Master Outcasts. And if Vaughan doesn't put on a lot of pressure, Mastery is going to overwhelm him very soon.
Yeah, and you talked about it before, Todd has worked his way up to 9 lands. On that last turn, Todd played Dragon Master Outcast and got to leave up 8 mana for 2 Mastery activations. We go back to Vaughan. Now he has 8 lands of his own. He's going to cast Ruinous Path with Awaken, targeting one of his lands and that Dragon Master Outcast that Todd played. But now we, of course, see if this resolves. Todd may go through for a dig through time.
Yeah, Todd has the conservative play, which is just let this resolve and make some mastery tokens. And he has the go for broke play, which is dig through time, find a counter spell, counter this Ruinous Path, and probably take the game over with Dragon Master Outcast.
And that's going to be the play. Here's dig through time. If Todd gets this to work, if he hits the counter spell, not only will he save his Dragon Master Outcast, he'll get a dragon next turn. This is huge. So 3 mana up, top 7 cards. Can Todd find a counterspell? He finds Utter End, Radiant Flames, and on the very 7th card, it's Negate. You see him immediately snap that one into his hand, takes the Radiant Flames to go with it. There's the Negate on Ruinous Path. Dragon Master Outcast is going to live, and that's huge for Todd.
Yeah. Even this happening once may be too much for Vaughan to overcome, and I think his hand right now is just a couple copies of Gideon, no answer to Dragon Master Outcast in sight, and it does not take long for this card to end the game.
With a shrug to Robert Vaughan, no play except for a Vampire token and a pass, so now we're over to Todd Anderson. Upkeep, here comes a dragon. As we go back to Todd, assembling an Air Force, he still has that Mastery of the Unseen in play, along with an Utter End in hand. Things are looking up for Todd and his Jeskai Black deck. He will just pass the turn. For Vaughan, there's still some gas in the tank. You see his draw there was Secure the Wastes. He does have 2 Gideons in hand. He could engineer some sort of end step and large swing, unless Todd has it covered with Radiant Flames. But he'll have to do it quickly. Those dragons take over the board really fast. So Robert's play for the turn. Gideon, 0, make a knight, play a land.
Now, this is a potentially very explosive setup here for Vaughan. Assume that he can protect both Planeswalkers here by chump blocking the dragons. Then he gets to secure for 4, untap, make an emblem, play another Gideon, make another emblem, plus Sorin, and that's a lot of creature pump.
Yeah, now speaking of creatures though, look at that. On the end step, Todd manifesting 2 cards, untaps makes us a 2nd dragon. So many creatures in play now for Todd. 2 dragons, 2 manifests. It's going to continue happening as we go back to his turn. Here's the first dragon, 5/5, going to try to take down Gideon. Robert's only block is with the Vampire token.
And Anderson's draw for the turn, I believe, was Disdainful Stroke, which is very important here. Cuts off a lot of Vaughn's combo kills would Secure the Wastes and various Planeswalkers.
Yeah, if that Secure the Wastes gets countered, I don't know if Robert can get the game to go in his way.
The rest of his hand and board is predicated on secure resolving.
Yeah.
His hand does not do much in the absence of it.
The attack with the dragon, Robert blocked with the Vampire token. We go back to Robert's turn. Here's Utter End on Gideon. That will work again. Gideon exiled for the 2nd time this game. And Robert will fetch, thinning out his deck. He has 1 Gideon left in hand, but 2 dragons in play for Todd. Could be a 3rd next turn.
And Vaughn's at 10 with 2 dragons eligible to attack next turn. So he's got to find something really good.
Seeker of the Way was the draw. Good, but not great. You're right, that's a lot of power in the air. Remember, Todd can manifest again as well. And how impressive has Dragon Master Outcast just been? You know, that was a card that was around last time we went to Zendikar. Didn't really ever touch constructed play. But now we're starting to see it in these Jeskai Black decks. And when you look at it in a game like this, the card is so powerful.
Ojutai's command is a big difference for this card. I don't think you can separate the 2.
Yeah, the ability to sneak him to play on end step, untap, and make a dragon is just
Jeskai Black
just good.
Gets to play with a looter in Jace, so you get to discard it early, and then you get to get it back at instant speed, plus value, countering a creature or drawing a card.
Todd manifests on the end step, untaps, makes a 3rd dragon with the Outcast, and this may be good enough to end the game. Robert had to make a Vampire last turn just so he could block. So Todd will give him 1 more turn. Here's 10 power in the air. Todd, no interest in attacking Sorin. That's all going at Robert. So Robert chumps one of the dragons, takes 5, goes to 5. We pass back to Robert. He'll try to Secure the Wastes, but it's a Disdainful Stroke from Todd Anderson. And with that is the match 2-1. Todd Anderson and Jeskai Black takes the round, moves to 8-2.
Dig Through Time is quite the card. I mean, Anderson's hand there was, he was flooding out, had nothing really going on there, and Dig Through Time was able to just chain together enough resources for Anderson to eventually overwhelm Vaughan, who had quite a few card advantage sources of his own.
Yeah, well, it looked like early on, Todd was going to run away with the game. We saw Robert miss a land drop, but then there was a duress from Robert, and we saw that Todd's hand was entirely lands. And you thought for a second, maybe Robert can get this, but even when you're land flooded, it only takes one Dig Through Time to get the deck rolling again, and that's just what Todd did.
Yeah, Dig found another dig and a critical piece of action over and over again. That, alongside the Master of the Unseen that Anderson was able to resolve early on in the game, gave him a lot of stuff to do with his mana, and even though it looked like Anderson was flooding out, it felt like he was able to use most, if not all, of his mana turn after turn in a protracted game.